Hi there. Today I'm going to talk to you about how you can start to develop your own walking bass lines and learn to play jazz. My name's Andrew Shaw, and I teach bass at the Jazz Music Institute, where we believe everyone can play jazz. Okay, so to play jazz bass, the thing you need to remember is that your job is to make everyone else sound good. That's the fundamental. So how do we do that? The first thing is we have to play with a great sound. We have to play with a great time feel, second. And third, we have to play in tune. So they're all things that we can deal with as we go along. The first thing we need to talk about, though, is where do we get the notes from? What notes do we play? Where do they come from to create a walking bass line? So today I'm going to talk to you about the 12-bar blues. When we have a melody, we also have a set of chords that go with it, the chord structure. In jazz, it's that chord structure which is repeated. And that's where the melody is played and where the solos take place. So with the 12-bar blues, we've got 12 bars. I'll deal with a simple harmonic version of the blues today, which just has 3 chords. The tonic chord, or the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. So knowing what notes are in the chord is really important because that's where we get our bass line from. We'll deal with beats 1 and 3 to start with. So on beat 1, you are probably going to play the root note of the chord. On beat 3, you will probably play the 5th. So I'll play through 12 bars of the blues to give you an idea of what that sounds like. So I'm only playing on beats 1 and 3. And I'm only using the 1st and the 5th to start with. 2, 3, 4. So there you go, that's 12 bars. We're only dealing with the 1st and the 5th on beats 1 and 3. That's only half a walking bass line though. We need to fill up beats 2 and 4. So where do those notes come from? Well, on beat 2, we're probably going to use another chord tone, like the 3rd, or maybe the 7th. Beat 4 is where it gets a bit more interesting. Beat 4, we could use another chord tone, or we can use a passing note, a chromatic note, to get to the next chord. We need to deal with arpeggios first, though. So a chord is where we play the notes together. If we break those notes up, we get an arpeggio. So we'll be dealing with 7th chords in the blues here. So the first chord is a C7. The arpeggio sounds like this. There's the C7 arpeggio with the octave sitting on the top. You might, in your music lessons, already play arpeggios that come from the major scale. You might play them like this. So we're moving around the cycle of fourths there, or you might play them chromatically, depending on what your teacher likes to do. Etc. It doesn't matter, either way, you get through everything eventually. So there's our arpeggio, the C7 arpeggio. There's also a scale that goes with that arpeggio, just like the major arpeggios that you're playing. They come from the major scale. We're using a dominant arpeggio which comes from a dominant scale. It's the same as the major scale except that it has a minor 7th instead of a major 7th. So if I just use, first of all, I'll play through the blues with triads. I'll just use the triad and not worry about the 7th as yet. That will sound like this. 3, 4. So there we go, just the triads. So you'll need to practice that and get that into your head and under your fingers. The next thing we'll add in that seventh that we just talked about. So there we go. They're the dominant arpeggios that go through the blues. Now, of course, as I said before, in jazz, we're going to play that chorus after chorus. We can't keep doing the same thing. So the next thing we need to think about are inversions of those arpeggios. I don't know if you're dealing with inversions yet, but maybe you are, maybe you're not. You need to. The root position is there. First inversion is where we start on the third. And we keep moving up. And they also descend. So we've got all of those notes to use and those combinations when we're starting to walk the bass. So we're only dealing with the arpeggios so far. A chorus of the blues can now start to sound like this. So we're starting to develop a walking bass line, but we're still only dealing with the arpeggio tones there. So coming back to the scale. Now when the chord is C7, we've got the C7 arpeggio. We also have the C7 scale, a dominant scale. A major scale, but with a minor seventh. You might also know it as the Mixolydian mode, if you've touched on modes yet. When we have a C7 chord, any of those notes from that scale will also work against that chord. We don't have to only play chord tones, we can play the scale that goes with it as well. So we can start to get something like this. So that was all diatonic, meaning that all of the notes I played came from the scales that go with the chords. The next step we get to is where we can start to add in some chromatic passing notes. This is what makes jazz walking bass lines a bit more interesting. And the chromaticism helps to create forward motion that makes the music feel like it's moving into that next chord, that it's not static. It's okay that we play a note that's not in the chord or the scale on the fourth beat, because the tension that that note creates is resolved as soon as we get to beat one of the next bar. So we can do this kind of thing. So there is the chromatic note dropping down onto the next root note on beat one of the 4 chord. I'll play a chorus for you. So there you go. There's a chorus of walking bass with chromaticism, with scales, only the dominant scale, and with the dominant arpeggios. So when we're talking about playing on 1 and 3 initially, that can lead us into the walking bass line where we're playing on all 4 beats of the bar. It can also lead us into another really important part of jazz bass playing, which is the 2-feel. The 2-feel is where we mainly play on beats 1 and 3. It'll usually have a lot more little rhythmic fills in it, whereas the walking bass will be a more constant driving 1, 2, 3, 4, with fewer fills, occasional skip notes, maybe. The thing about the jazz melodies that we play is that they're about syncopation. So the walking bass kind of ignores that, and it gives all of those syncopated rhythms in melodies and solos something to hang off. This is why the walking bass is important to be driving and solid. All of the other rhythms hang off it. You need to practice these things meticulously and patiently and persistently, and use a metronome and get your time solid. Okay, thanks very much for watching. There you have it. You can start to make your own walking bass lines. Practice, practice, practice. Leave a comment and let us know what you'd like to see in the future, what other information you'd like to learn from these videos. Thanks a lot.